The heavily armored soldiers were growing tired as they hunted the strange forces that had first engaged them in battle a week prior. It was refugees from the steppe who initially warned the quarreling princes of the Kievan Rus, imploring them to unite their armies against a massive, godless horde. Now, positioned on the banks of the Kalka River, proudly displaying their banners, the Rus' forces finally caught sight of the enemy. These were the Mongols, who had recently reduced the mighty Islamic Khwarezmian Empire to smouldering heaps of corpses and driven its unfortunate king into the Caspian Sea. They had ventured north under the command of Subutai and Jebe to scout and wage war in unexplored territories. A young Kievan Rus' prince named Danilo led his men across the river, initiating a reckless charge through a barrage of arrows. Danilo managed to break through the Mongol lines, slaying several of the enemy. One enemy soldier pierced his chest, and his allies rushed to Danilo's aid. However, the Mongol horse archers swiftly outflanked them. The Mongols pursued the exhausted Rus' forces into a disorganized retreat, massacring thousands. Returning east across fields of Rus' corpses, the Mongols disappeared, and nothing more was heard from them for a time. Danilo and the other surviving princes returned to their thrones. Their presence in these remote European lands revealed not to nameless wild tribes, but to the most powerful force in the world, the Mongol Empire. The Mongols now began the long trek back to the court of Genghis Khan. The Kievan Rus had been founded in the 9th century and had once stood as a strong, unified entity on Europe's eastern frontier. However, as the centuries passed, powerful principalities emerged within its borders. Clans and aristocrats fueled rivalries, and trade routes dwindled. The power of the Kievan Rus became fragmented and divided among lesser princes, who were just as likely to raise an army against each other as against the knights and hordes beyond their borders. With immense effort, some attempted to restore the federation to the glory of its golden age. Roman the Great unified several regions and became master of all of Western Rus', primarily ruling in the land called Ukraine. But he was killed in battle. His son, Danilo, laid claim to the lands ruled by his father, but only ruled a portion of it, specifically the western region of Halish-Volhynia. In 1237, 14 years after the Battle of the Kalka River, terror descended upon the eastern reaches of the Kievan Rus'. The Mongol horde arrived, demanding the surrender of the city of Ryazan. The people refused and fiercely repelled the initial Mongol attacks, but they were soon overwhelmed. The Ryazan prince perished with his city, and it was later written that there was no one left to groan or cry. Although Genghis Khan had died in 1227, his son, Ögedei, had succeeded him and ordered the conquest of the Kievan Rus'. Genghis Khan's grandson, Batu Khan, led the invasion, accompanied by the top princes and generals of the empire, including the dreaded Subutai. They ravaged the old principalities in a westward push, massacring civilians, and then rode south to sack Crimea. Batu Khan and his forces advanced under ashen skies. In 1239, beyond the Podil district, the churches rose, their domes pointed like closed flowers, topped by simple crosses. Below, the peasants bustled in their creaking hovels, and carts and cattle lumbered through the streets, seemingly oblivious to the distant splendor of the capital. Kyiv. Mongol Khan expressed his desire to spare the city should its people submit without resistance. The Grand Prince of Kyiv, Mikhail of Chernigov, rejected his proposal and fled. Mongol Khan then led his Mongols away to campaign or rest elsewhere. A year passed. Danilo installed his vassal, Dmitro, to rule the city. The rivers turned to ice, and the rumble of the horde reached the gates of Kyiv. Batu Khan pitched camp outside the city while his men besieged it. The din caused by the screeching carts, the countless bleeding camels, and the neighing herds of horses was so deafening that nothing else could be heard. The land of Rus' became overrun with soldiers. Chinese engineers pushed forward with advanced siege weapons and splintered the timber walls of Kyiv. Stones hurtled from the sky, burying towers, homes, and people. After a few days, the invaders breached the walls. The Kyivans rushed to meet them on the ramparts, killing the first zealous invaders. The Mongols overwhelmed them and soon rode rampant through the burning streets. Civilians retreated to the Church of the Tithes, seeking refuge behind their desperate fortifications. They cloistered around a radiant altar as the Mongols stormed the doors. The frantic Kievans rushed onto the strained balconies, and the church collapsed, crushing hundreds within. The last vestiges of the Kievan Rus had fallen, and the lands to the west were now exposed. The Mongols, under Batu and Subutai, would press into Central Europe. Polish, Hungarian, and German forces, along with the Knights Templar, would ride out to stop them, only to be scattered in the fray. Prince Danilo, meanwhile, received word that his wife and children had survived the Mongol invasion and fled to Poland. In a tearful reunion, he located them by a river called the Pilika. He then informed them that it was not safe for them to remain there. He later departed to survey his own fallen cities. Danilo, accompanied by his brother, came to Berestia, but could not venture out into the field because of the stench emanating from the countless decaying dead. In all of Volodymyr, not one person remained alive. The Church of the Blessed Virgin was filled with corpses. As were other churches, Mongol conquest had not ended regional conflicts. Danilo and other princes maintained alliances and feuds, and clashed with Poles and Lithuanians in the borderlands. But the Mongols kept a watchful eye on those who threatened their authority. Defeated princes and governors had to ask Batu Khan to confirm their rulership in their former lands, so that they might rule as vassals of the Mongols, required to offer tribute to the Khan in the form of taxes. Soldiers and labourers, Mikhail of Chernigov came to the court of Batu Khan in 1246. He bowed in respect to the conqueror, but refused Batu's demand to bow to Mongol icons and honour the dead Genghis Khan. "We bow down to you and pay you homage, but we will not worship in the faith of your ancestors. We will not obey this order of yours, which is blasphemy in the eyes of God." Batu grew furious and ordered Mikhail and his grandson stabbed to death. Mikhail of Chernigov was martyred and in time attained sainthood. Long hunted by the forces of Batu Khan, Prince Danilo was also summoned. He sought the solemn wisdom and prayers of monks before answering the call. Batu and Danilo negotiated an exchange of military prisoners, and Batu offered Danilo a cup of Mara's milk. Danilo confessed that he had not yet tried it but would drink it if he wished to which Batu replied that Danilo was already one of them, a Mongol, and should therefore drink their beverage. Danilo, however, sought only to undermine the Mongols in the coming years. He fostered good relations with the kingdoms of Poland and Hungary and cultivated the support of allies in the West. He implored Pope Innocent IV to bring Roman authority to his lands and mobilize a crusade against the Mongols. Although Danilo only received the papal gift of a title and a crown, King of Ruthenia, he and his sons and his brother would muster an army to reclaim their lands. They rode from town to town over the winter of 1254, sparing civilians but shattering the yoke of Mongol rule wherever they went. The gallant campaign of Danilo had begun to cast out Mongol loyalists among the Rus and provoke the wrath of the Mongol horde. Mongol General Keremsa readied an army sworn to crush this insurrection, and they moved to take the city of Volodymyr in 1257. For a long time, the people of the city had sought retribution for the loss of their kin, those the Mongols left rotting in the halls of sacred churches. Taking up their shields, the men of Volodymyr flew out of the gates in a horseless onslaught on the amber fields. They drove their spears through their enemies and wildly slew them with their swords. The Mongols scattered and fled. King Danilo's forces galloped out and hunted down more Mongols, but Keremsa then decided to punish the defenseless city of Lutsk. He arrived at a frigid and roaring river. The people of Lutsk suddenly rushed out and cut down the bridge before them. Keremsa abandoned the siege and departed to the steppe with his troops. While the victorious King Danilo planned to retake Kiev, the Mongols returned in greater numbers under more capable leadership, offering the cruel promise of total annihilation should the cities refuse to submit. The Mongols ordered the destruction of Danilo's fortifications. King Danilo sought refuge, and his brother Vasilko was forced to accept their terms. The military campaign against the Mongols had ended, but King Danilo would return, and over the years he would rebuild and expand beyond the lands once ruled by his father. Although vassals of the Mongol Empire, King Danilo of Halych-Volhynia and his Ukrainian, Hungarian, Polish, and other subjects maintained, under Mongol rule, some flourishing measure of independence, an untamable defiance which survived even Danilo, who died in 1264. The Mongols foresaw the great trouble of conquering and holding these lands, for Ogedei Khan had long ago been warned by his brother Chagatai, they're at the end of the world. They are a hard people. They are people who, when they become angry, would rather die by their own swords. I found that a long day of study is best concluded with a glass of fine wine. And thanks to today's sponsor, Bright Cellars, all History Dose viewers will get a customized selection of 6 wines for 50% off. That's 6 bottles for just $55, including shipping. Bright Cellars makes it incredibly simple. It's a monthly wine membership that uses a 7-question quiz to match you with wines based on your tastes. Once I finished the quiz, it automatically curated a selection of 6 wines, and I was good to go. I didn't need to run to the store and scour the aisles for something I liked. It came right to my door, and it's a lot of fun unboxing your matches. They're sourced from hundreds of vineyards all around the world. You get wine education cards for each bottle with information about how to store each one, what food you can serve them with, and where they're from. I started with an Italian red, Ladro de Uva. It has this wonderful but smooth taste. I'm also super excited to host some dinners and open up the Dreamlit and Obscura wines I received. So, if you'd like to support History Dose, follow the link below to take the quiz and get started today. The soldiers, clad head to toe in armor, were getting worn down from their relentless pursuit of the strange enemy combatants they'd first encountered a week before. It was refugees hailing from the vast steppes who had initially alerted the feuding princes of the Kievan Rus, earnestly pleading with them to unite their forces against an immense, godless invading force. Now, taking their stand along the shores of the Kalka River, their proud banners waving high, the Rus army finally spotted their adversaries. These were the Mongol warriors, fresh from obliterating the once mighty Islamic Khwarezmian Empire, leaving behind only smoking ruins and corpses, and driving its deposed king to seek refuge in the distant Caspian Sea. Under the leadership of the skilled commanders Subutai and Yebe, they'd pushed northward to scout and wage war in these unfamiliar, uncharted lands. A brave, youthful Kievan Rus's prince by the name of Danilo boldly led his troops across the river, initiating a daring, impetuous charge directly into a storm of incoming arrows. Danilo, with unwavering resolve, managed to break through the dense Mongol lines, personally taking down several enemy soldiers in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Suddenly, an enemy combatant managed to pierce Danilo's chest, inflicting a grievous wound. Seeing their prince fall, his loyal allies immediately rushed to his defense. However, the highly skilled Mongol horse archers swiftly outmaneuvered them. Flanking their position with deadly accuracy, the Mongols pressed their advantage, relentlessly pursuing the exhausted Rus troops into a chaotic, disorganized retreat, inflicting a devastating massacre that left thousands dead on the battlefield. After their bloody victory, the Mongols turned eastward, riding back across the fields littered with the lifeless bodies of the Rus' soldiers, and vanished from sight. For a time, nothing more was heard from them. Danilo and the other surviving princes returned to their respective thrones, realizing that their presence in these far-flung European territories had been revealed not to some insignificant tribes, but to the most formidable military power the world had ever known, the vast, unstoppable Mongol Empire. Now, the Mongol forces embarked on a long and arduous journey back to the opulent court of the legendary Genghis Khan. The Kievan Rus' state had been established way back in the 9th century, and had once stood as a powerful, cohesive entity, a crucial bulwark on Europe's eastern frontier. But as the centuries unfolded, strong, independent principalities began to emerge and assert themselves within its borders. Powerful clans and ambitious aristocrats constantly fueled petty rivalries and internecine conflicts, and lucrative trade routes began to dry up and wither away. The overall power and influence of the Kievan Rus gradually became fragmented and dispersed among a multitude of lesser princes, who were often more inclined to raise armies and make war against each other than to unite against the common enemies lurking beyond their borders. The menacing knights and savage hordes that threatened their very existence. Despite these internal divisions, some leaders made heroic efforts to restore the Federation to its former glory. recapturing the splendor of its golden age. Roman the Great, through shrewd political maneuvering and military might, successfully unified several disparate regions and emerged as the undisputed master of all of Western Russes, primarily ruling over the fertile and strategically important lands we now know as Ukraine. Tragically, Roman was ultimately slain in battle, cutting short his ambitious plans. His son, Danilo, inherited his father's aspirations and laid claim to all the territories that Roman had once controlled. But in reality, he only held dominion over a portion of it, specifically the western region of Halish-Volhynia. In the year 1237, a mere 14 years after the devastating Battle of the Kalka River, a wave of unprecedented terror swept across the eastern territories of the Kievan Rus. The dreaded Mongol horde suddenly appeared, demanding the immediate surrender of the prosperous city of Ryazan. The courageous people of Ryazan vehemently refused to yield and valiantly repelled the initial Mongol assaults, inflicting heavy casualties on the invaders. However, their heroic defense was ultimately in vain, as they were eventually overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and relentless ferocity of the Mongol forces. The brave Prince of Ryazan perished along with his city, and it was later written in the chronicles that there was not a single soul left alive to even groan or weep in mourning. Although the legendary Genghis Khan himself had passed away in 1227, his capable son, Ögedei Khan, had succeeded him as the great Khan of the Mongol Empire and promptly issued the order for the complete and utter conquest of the Kievan Rus. Leading the massive invasion was none other than Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, accompanied by the most skilled princes and experienced generals in the entire Mongol Empire, including the infamous and utterly ruthless Subutai. These fearsome Mongol armies ruthlessly ravaged the ancient principalities in a relentless westward push, slaughtering countless innocent civilians in their wake. Then, their insatiable thirst for conquest drove them southward to brutally sack the Crimean Peninsula. Batu Khan and his seemingly endless legions advanced under skies choked with ash and smoke, a grim harbinger of the destruction to come. In the year 1239, beyond the old Podil district of Kyiv, the magnificent churches soared toward the heavens, their distinctive domes resembling closed flower buds, each adorned with a simple, elegant cross. Down below, in stark contrast to the grandeur above, the common peasants scurried about their daily lives in their humble, creaking wooden homes, while heavily laden carts and lumbering cattle clogged the bustling streets, their occupants seemingly oblivious to the distant splendor of the capital city of Kiev. Mongol Khan, a powerful Mongol leader, magnanimously expressed his desire to spare the city from destruction, but only if its inhabitants were willing to submit peacefully without any resistance. The reigning Grand Prince of Kiev, Mikhail of Chernigov, staunchly rejected this proposal and promptly fled the city, leaving its fate uncertain. In response, Mongol Khan simply led his Mongol warriors away to continue their relentless campaigns or to seek rest and recuperation elsewhere, temporarily bypassing the defiant city. As the seasons turned, a full year went by. Danilo, ever the pragmatist, shrewdly installed his trusted vassal, Dmitro, as the ruler of the now vulnerable city. As winter approached, the rivers gradually froze over, solidifying into shimmering sheets of ice. Then, the dreaded rumble of the approaching Mongol horde reached the very gates of Kyiv, signaling impending doom. The formidable Batu Khan, a name that struck fear into the hearts of men, strategically pitched his vast encampment just outside the city walls, while his merciless warriors began a brutal siege. The cacophony of sounds emanating from the Mongol camp was utterly deafening, a horrifying symphony of screeching carts, the mournful cries of countless wounded camels, and the incessant neighing of massive herds of horses. The once peaceful lands of the Rus were now completely overrun with foreign soldiers, their presence a stark and terrifying reminder of the Mongol Empire's overwhelming military might. Skilled Chinese engineers, pressed into service by the Mongols, advanced towards the city walls, deploying advanced siege weaponry with devastating effect. Massive stones were hurled through the air, crashing down upon Kyiv, burying towers, homes, and innocent people alike under tons of rubble. After enduring days of this relentless bombardment, the relentless invaders finally managed to breach the city's defenses, tearing gaping holes in the once impregnable walls. The brave Kievans, with a fierce determination born of desperation, rushed to meet the invaders head-on at the ramparts, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat and managing to slay some of the initial waves of zealous attackers. However, the overwhelming numbers and superior training of the Mongol warriors soon turned the tide of battle. The Mongols surged forward, relentlessly pushing back the defenders and quickly overrunning the city, riding rampant through the burning streets, leaving a trail of destruction and despair in their wake. Panicked civilians, desperately seeking sanctuary from the carnage, retreated to the Church of the Tithes, hoping to find refuge behind its supposedly impregnable walls. Clustered around a radiant altar, praying for divine intervention, they braced themselves for the inevitable onslaught. As the Mongol warriors battered down the doors, the frantic Kievans, in a desperate attempt to escape the advancing enemy, rushed onto the already strained and weakened balconies of the church. With a sickening groan, the overloaded balconies gave way, and the entire church structure tragically collapsed, crushing hundreds of terrified souls within its crumbling walls. With this horrific event, the last vestiges of the once proud Kievan Rus had finally fallen, leaving the lands to the west completely exposed and vulnerable to further Mongol incursions. The seemingly unstoppable Mongol forces, led by the ruthless duo of Batu and Subutai, would continue their relentless advance into the heart of Central Europe, spreading fear and devastation wherever they went. Polish, Hungarian, and German forces, along with the elite Knights Templar, bravely rode out to confront the Mongol invaders, hoping to halt their advance, but they were ultimately scattered and defeated in the ensuing battles. Unable to withstand the Mongol war machine, Prince Danilo, meanwhile, received the joyous news that his beloved wife and children had miraculously survived the brutal Mongol invasion and had managed to escape to the relative safety of Poland. Overjoyed and filled with hope, he embarked on a journey to find them, eventually locating them near the banks of the Pilika River, where they shared a tearful and emotional reunion. Despite his happiness at finding his family safe, Danilo knew that they could not remain in Poland for long, as the threat of the Mongols still loomed large. He somberly informed them that it was too dangerous for them to stay, and he made plans for their continued safety. After ensuring their well-being, Danilo, with a heavy heart, departed to survey the devastation wrought upon his own fallen cities, hoping to find some way to rebuild and restore his shattered kingdom. Accompanied by his loyal brother, Danilo travelled to the ravaged city of Berestia, but they were unable to venture out into the open fields due to the overwhelming stench of death emanating from the countless decaying corpses that lay unburied. Throughout the entire region of Volodymyr, not a single person remained alive, a testament to the utter devastation inflicted by the Mongol invasion. The once sacred church of the Blessed Virgin was filled to the brim with lifeless bodies, as were all the other churches throughout the city, their sanctity violated by the horrors of war. The Mongol conquest had not brought an end to the existing regional conflicts and rivalries. Danilo and the other surviving princes continued to maintain their complex web of alliances and feuds, engaging in clashes with Polish and Lithuanian forces in the disputed borderlands. But now, a new, more powerful force loomed over them all, the watchful eyes of the Mongols, who were constantly on guard against any perceived threats to their authority. Any defeated princes or governors who wished to retain their power and lands were now required to formally request permission from Batu Khan himself, seeking confirmation of their rulership in their former territories. To secure their positions, they had to agree to rule as vassals of the Mongol Empire, obligated to offer tribute to the Khan in the form of taxes. Soldiers and labourers, effectively becoming puppets of the Mongol overlords. In the year 1246, Mikhail of Chernigov, the former Grand Prince of Kyiv, reluctantly travelled to the opulent court of Batu Khan, seeking to appease the Mongol ruler and retain some semblance of his former authority. He dutifully bowed in respect to the mighty conqueror, acknowledging his power and dominance, However, Mikhail staunchly refused to comply with Batu's demand that he bow down to Mongol icons and offer reverence to the deceased Genghis Khan, whom the Mongols considered a divine figure. With unwavering conviction, Mikhail declared, "We bow down to you and pay you homage, but we will not worship in the faith of your ancestors. We will not obey this order of yours, which is blasphemy in the eyes of God." Enraged by Mikhail's defiance and perceived insubordination, the furious Batu Khan immediately ordered Mikhail and his young grandson to be brutally stabbed to death, a chilling example of the Mongols' ruthless justice. Kyiv of Chernigov was thus martyred for his faith and principles, and in the fullness of time, he was canonized as a saint by the Orthodox Church, becoming a symbol of resistance against foreign oppression. Having long been hunted by the relentless forces of Batu Khan, Prince Danilo also received a summons to appear before the Mongol ruler, a prospect that filled him with trepidation and uncertainty. Before answering the call, Danilo wisely sought the counsel and solemn prayers of monks, seeking guidance and strength from their spiritual wisdom. After careful deliberation, Batu and Danilo engaged in tense negotiations, ultimately agreeing to an exchange of military prisoners, a small step towards easing the hostilities between them. During their meeting, Batu offered Danilo a ceremonial cup of mare's milk, a traditional Mongol beverage. Danilo, perhaps cautiously, confessed that he had not yet tried it, but would be willing to drink it if he so desired. In response, Batu slyly remarked that Danilo was already one of them, a Mongol in spirit, and should therefore embrace their customs and drink their beverage. However, Danilo's true intentions were far more complex. In the years that followed, he secretly sought only to undermine the Mongols' power and influence. Working diligently to weaken their hold on his lands, he skillfully fostered good relations with the neighboring kingdoms of Poland and Hungary, cultivating alliances that would prove crucial in his future struggles. He also reached out to the West, imploring Pope Innocent IV to extend Roman authority to his lands and to mobilize a grand crusade against the Mongols, hoping to unite Christendom against the common enemy. Although Danilo only received the papal gift of a symbolic title and a crown, being recognized as the King of Ruthenia, he remained undeterred in his ultimate goal. He and his sons, along with his loyal brother, would eventually muster a formidable army, preparing to reclaim their lost lands from the clutches of the Mongol Empire. As the harsh winter of 1254 descended upon the land, they rode from town to town, liberating settlements from Mongol control, sparing the civilian population whenever possible, but resolutely shattering the yoke of Mongol rule wherever they went. The gallant campaign of Danilo had finally begun, aiming to drive out the Mongol loyalists and collaborators who had infiltrated the Ruses' lands, a bold act of defiance that would inevitably provoke the wrath of the vengeful Mongol horde. General Khuremsa, a seasoned Mongol commander, was tasked with quelling this burgeoning insurrection. He promptly readied a formidable army, sworn to crush Danilo's rebellion, and they marched towards the strategically important city of Volodymyr in 1257, intending to make an example of its defiant inhabitants. For a long time, the people of Volodymyr had harbored a burning desire for retribution, seeking vengeance for the loss of their loved ones, whose bodies had been left to rot in the desecrated halls of their sacred churches, a gruesome reminder of the Mongol brutality. Driven by this thirst for revenge, the men of Volodymyr bravely took up their shields and, without horses, launched a desperate, suicidal attack on the advancing Mongol army in the amber-coloured fields outside the city walls. With unwavering courage, they drove their spears through the Mongol ranks and wildly slashed at their enemies with their swords, fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals. The unexpected ferocity of the Volodymyr defenders initially caught the Mongols off guard, causing them to scatter and flee in disarray. Emboldened by this initial success, King Danilo's forces galloped out from the city gates, relentlessly pursuing the fleeing Mongols and hunting them down one by one. However, the cunning General Khuremsa, realizing that he could not easily subdue Volodymyr, decided to punish the defenseless city of Lutsk, hoping to break the spirit of the rebellion. He led his troops towards Lutsk, arriving at the banks of a frigid and rapidly flowing river. Seeing the approaching Mongol army, the resourceful people of Lutsk suddenly rushed out and chopped down the bridge spanning the river, effectively preventing Kuremsa and his troops from crossing. Frustrated and unable to lay siege to Lutsk, Kuremsa reluctantly abandoned his plans and departed with his troops back to the vast steppes, his mission unaccomplished. Meanwhile, the victorious King Danilo, emboldened by his successes, began to formulate plans to retake the strategically vital city of Kiev, the former heart of the Kievan Rus. However, the Mongols, ever resilient, returned in even greater numbers under the command of more capable and ruthless leadership, offering the cities of the Rus a cruel ultimatum: total annihilation if they refused to submit unconditionally to Mongol rule. To demonstrate their resolve, the Mongols ordered the complete destruction of all of Danilo's fortifications, effectively leaving his cities defenseless. King Danilo, facing overwhelming odds, reluctantly sought refuge elsewhere, realizing that he could not withstand the full might of the Mongol Empire. His brother, Vasilko, was forced to accept the Mongols' harsh terms, effectively surrendering to their authority. The active military campaign against the Mongols had come to an end. For now, however, King Danilo, a man of unwavering spirit and ambition, vowed to return, and over the years he would diligently rebuild and expand his kingdom, eventually surpassing the lands once ruled by his father, Roman the Great. Although they were now vassals of the Mongol Empire, forced to pay tribute and acknowledge Mongol supremacy, King Danilo of Halych-Volhynia and his diverse subjects, including Ukrainians, Hungarians, Poles, and others, managed to maintain a surprising degree of independence under Mongol rule, preserving an untamable spirit of defiance that would survive even beyond Danilo's death in 1264. The Mongols, despite their initial successes, had long foreseen the immense difficulties of conquering and holding these vast and unruly lands. Ogedei Khan himself had been warned long ago by his sagacious brother Chagatai. They're at the end of the world. They are a hard people. They are people who, when they become angry, would rather die by their own swords. I found that a long day of intensive historical study is best concluded with a relaxing glass of fine wine. And thanks to today's generous sponsor, Bright Cellars, all History Dose viewers can now receive a customized selection of 6 exquisite wines for a remarkable 50% off the regular price. That's 6 full-size bottles of carefully selected wine for just $55. And that price even includes shipping directly to your door. Bright Cellars makes the entire process incredibly simple and convenient. It's a monthly wine membership service that utilizes a quick and easy 7-question online quiz to precisely match you with wines that perfectly suit your individual tastes and preferences. After I quickly completed the quiz, the Bright Cellars system automatically curated a diverse and appealing selection of 6 different wines, tailored specifically to my palate, and I was ready to go. There was no need for me to spend hours wandering through endless store aisles, aimlessly searching for something I might like. Instead, a curated selection of high-quality wines came directly to my doorstep, saving me both time and effort. Unboxing and discovering your personalized matches is a genuinely enjoyable and exciting experience. The wines are sourced from hundreds of carefully selected vineyards located all around the world, ensuring a diverse and fascinating range of flavors and styles. To further enhance your wine experience, Bright Cellars includes informative wine education cards for each bottle, providing you with detailed information about how to properly store each wine, what food pairings will best complement its flavors, and the region from which it originates. I decided to begin my tasting journey with an exceptional Italian red wine called Ladro de Uva. It possesses a wonderfully complex yet remarkably smooth taste, making it an ideal accompaniment to a wide variety of dishes. I'm also incredibly excited to host some upcoming dinner parties and finally open up the intriguing Dreamlit and Obscura wines that I also received in my customized selection. So, if you'd like to support History Dose and elevate your own wine experience, simply follow the convenient link provided below to take the quick quiz and get started with Bright Cellars today.